Thank you for having us, Kim. I'm Mansi Vora. I'm the Director of Product Design at Manhattan Associates. I've been leading the product design function there for about 4 years now, and we've been working on some market-leading supply chain applications used by some of the world's most renowned retail brands. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to sharing insights from experience and, glad to be part of this panel. Dmitry, over to you.
Thanks, Mansi. Dmitry Nekrasovski. I currently lead the product design function at Atlas, which is an EOR, or employer of record platform, the world's largest direct employer of record platform. Have been leading product design teams for about 8 years now in B2B startups, scale-ups, and enterprises. And very excited to be here with my fellow panelists. I'll pass it off to Scott.
Actually, Joe, why don't you go, because I'll launch into the slides.
Awesome, thanks. So my name is Joseph Williams. I'm a product design director at Project 44, which is a visibility platform for both carriers and shippers within the logistics space. I've been there for about two years or so. Time is relative, I guess, at this point. But before that, I've worked in FAANG companies as well as sort of like incubator and accelerators. So I've seen the full gambit from both sort of large tech to more intimate settings. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Scott, take us home.
Yes, so Scott Mackie started life as a mechanical engineer, but after doing medical device development and a little bit of management consulting, landed at IDEO, where I generalized my design skills, ended up doing a lot of digital design. From there, I went to a startup pursuing wearable blood pressure sensing, and then to Athena Health, which is a $10 billion SaaS business providing electronic health records, and led a global design team of about 90 people for 3 years there. From that, I took a risk on a climate change unicorn startup, and I was there for 3.5 years, up until July, when appropriately, as you'll hear to this conversation, I was made redundant along with 65% of the tech team. So I'm playing the role of representing that part of the market in this conversation, and looking forward to the discussion. So with that, I'm going to dive into, I'm going to lead us off with a few slides just to set the scene. And when we were talking about how we were going to run this conversation, is this doing a weird thing where it's not working properly for you? For me, it's, oh, there we go. We want to talk about this, that it's a tough market. It's sort of all over LinkedIn and Twitter, or X if you're still there, or various other social media networks, and it's all through the papers. While some aspects of the economy are starting to pick up and have done pretty well actually over the last couple of years, for the tech market, it's certainly been a very tough time. As you see here, literally hundreds of thousands of people laid off in the tech market. As you can see, it's getting better, but I don't know about the rest of you, but I still see weekly posts from people saying that their company is letting go of people. A little bit of extra data that you may have seen already from Indeed. This is for the USA. You see job postings, enjoyed huge growth in 2022. UX research and product management leading the pack, but also design, and then dropping off significantly. And same thing in the UK and Ireland, and I suspect you'd see the same thing in most parts of the world if you had that data. So it's certainly tough out there, and there's a lot of scrutiny on spending at numerous companies. And so that's why today we decided to focus on that operating in a difficult environment where there's a lot of scrutiny on spending, resources are tight, you may be asked to do more with less, and there's a lot of candidates on the market at the same time. So today we're going to sort of frame the conversation around these three topic areas: getting hired or hiring, operating, and influencing. And for all three of those, we're going to focus on what it means for a design leader operating in this situation. With that, I'll pass it back to Kimberly to kick us off on that first topic.
Sure, thanks, Scott. So how does hiring change in a tough market, and what does that mean for candidates, and how should they present themselves?
Who wants to go first? Mansi?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing those insights, Scott. I think, it's undeniable the amount of layoffs that we've seen. But I think a balancing perspective there also is companies are positioning themselves for a wave of innovation, really pointing in the direction of, AI, generative AI, and then, augmented and virtual reality. So I think there is a perspective and shift in terms of repositioning design talent, to kind of embrace some of that innovation. So I think in my perspective, it really, I think, comes down to balancing those tight budgets and hiring appropriately for the business areas that are going to see growth. And so I think it's likely that for the next couple of months or so, maybe even into next year, that we might see a more generalized or generalist role pick up, meaning lesser of specialized roles, more diverse talent, and designers who are capable of shuffling different responsibilities and kind of working through just a varied and juggling varied responsibilities. So I think in general, working under tight budgets also means driving value with lesser resources. And so I feel as leaders, just being cognizant and prioritizing areas that will see maximum value for business is going to be important. Open to hearing other perspectives, and anybody else who wants to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Mansi. I think it's definitely an interesting time right now, both for hiring and for leaders who are trying to make arguments to staff their teams and resource their teams, in the sense that there are certainly areas that are drawing companies' interest in terms of innovation. Of course, AI, generative AI, and related topics have already been mentioned. Anything to do with data, anything to do with developer experience are also sometimes things that businesses want to invest in. And on the other hand, there's also, of course, a huge desire for companies of all sizes, whether anywhere from startups to scale-ups to public companies, to show return on their investment. And so what I'm seeing as well in the market right now is some of the more, I guess, foresighted organizations out there are starting to look at redesigning their core products, redesigning their core workflows, because these are the things that are driving revenues for these organizations, and these are the ways that they can retain customers and increase their customer base. So I think from both a hiring and a staffing perspective, it's important to be cognizant of these two trends that are almost in opposition to each other, but to me, these are the two key trends that you want to capitalize on, whether as a design leader looking to grow or retain their team, or as a candidate in the current market. Scott, Joseph.
Yeah, I think actually just to build off of that a little bit, I guess how I've been seeing it, at least sort of like over the past coming months, is like a refocus around like purposeful design. I think in previous sort of like climates, I guess, to put it lightly, design as a function, I think could get away with sort of being a little bit more explorative and like pushing the boundary around where the company could go or the things that we could be investing in. And now I've seen like a huge reallocation of that resource into exactly as sort of like both of you said before me, in sort of what is the core of what we are offering as a company and how can we make that better. I think more practically around like how designers can be positioning themselves is more around like really honing in and focusing on like interaction design. And what I mean by that is I think it's no longer good enough just to show something as a possibility of here is what something could look like, but now it's like, okay, how does this fit in not only to the company's initiatives but also to the wider ecosystem that you're designing into. I've seen far too many portfolios of recent days, and I know I'm sort of like skipping ahead here, where it's just like blank flat two-dimensional experiences. So really leaning into, okay, what is the bigger picture and what is the actual value driver here? So that's just to build off the two things that you just said, Scott.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I've been doing a lot of talking to hiring managers, both design leaders who are hiring at large companies, but also product leaders who and other senior people in technology organizations who may be looking to hire a design leader. There are still roles out there for sure that people are looking to fill, but certainly the job market is a different beast than 2 years ago, as those stats would suggest. And so the crux of it is, and I've heard several people say this, whereas before you'd put a job posting out there, you'd get 50 candidates apply, and of those 5 were obvious first round screens. Now people are getting 300 applications in 3 days, closing that posting because they're just overwhelmed, and then having to figure out how do you sift through those 300 in order to narrow it down to 5 people that you can afford to spend time on. And the result is that people are using some pretty crude filters for that. I saw somebody saying, people complain a lot that companies will filter based on experience at FANG companies or whatever group you want to call it. But they framed it as, they're basically relying on the filtering that those companies did to get those people in the door, which by all accounts, they've had the luxury of being able to develop very good hiring practices over the years. And so that's basically one way to do it. The other thing is, to your point, Joe, that they're looking for people with very tangible results. They don't want to hear about process. They want to hear what impact you drove. And they're also, I think, having the luxury of saying, we're only going to look at people who have very relevant experience as well. So there's a lot of focus on going, lateral moves in industry or role. Now is not the time to be trying to make that, it seems. Now, networking will always help you move around some of those barriers. That's become even more important. The quality of your CV or portfolio has actually slipped relative to the importance of networking to try to break through that noise. But it's just tough on all fronts in that regard.
Thanks, Scott. And can you share your thoughts on how to be an invaluable leader when times are tough as well?
Do you mean in terms of operating or influence, or should we stay focused on hiring?
Yeah, if you want to carry on hiring, yeah.
I don't know if there's much more to say on the hiring front. Who else has a comment or something they're dying to say? I think I had one more thing to say just around resourcing, which is, and I think other people sort of touched around this, but just to be really direct, I think it's a great time as a design leader to be saying, I need these resources, be they existing staff that you want to keep despite budget pressure or new staff that you are looking to hire. To talk about the expenses you will save in other parts of the business, or and it could be, it could be staff and other parts of the business, which is awkward, but it could also be around errors, returns, waste, those sorts of operational waste. Design has the power to impact those, and you should be focusing on those. I also, anywhere that you can enable scale without increasing cost is also a great thing. So framing the work that you do as a design team and the impact of your team's work in allowing the company to grow revenue without growing cost is particularly important at times like this.
Yeah, that's well said, Scott. I think one perspective always to keep in mind is the training cost. Every time you lose talent, you've lost a bunch of expertise. And what is it going to cost you in future to get up to that level again? I think I always go back to a Forrester report. It's been a few years, but I think it's still relevant, where every dollar spent on UX gives about 100x return. So I think, just tapping into research that's already out there, and, the proof of ROI on investing in UX and keeping that perspective, and, continuing to evangelize on behalf of the function is, I think, pretty critical.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mansi. And I also want to add that as a field, we in UX and design have been talking about the ROI of UX and the ROI of design for a very long time. And it seems to me that these are not necessarily conversations that are yielding a lot of results, because the ROI calculations for UX specifically, or for design specifically, can be so complicated, and it's really hard to point at a tangible impact of UX and design working in isolation. Really, the impact of our work tends to be when we partner effectively with our cross-functional partners. But the term that I would propose in place of ROI is capital efficiency, which is a term that is being talked about extensively these days. John Cutler, who is one of the leading minds in product management right now, has a great post on this. And essentially, capital efficiency is just how efficiently does an organization use their resources, whether monetary resources or staff or whatever the case may be. And design, in my mind, can argue in a number of different ways that what we bring to the table is a far more efficient use of resources for the organization that employ us than simply, shipping things and hoping that customers or users buy them and like them, and essentially throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. Whether through research or whether through conceptual design to make strategy tangible, we are uniquely positioned to help organizations, in my mind, especially software product organizations, to be more capital efficient. And this is something that I hope to see our field sort of become more cognizant of and talk more about.
I think the last thing that I'll probably add on to this is I probably should have been upfront that I work for a US company at the moment, so I'm based in the US, but I've seen a lot of US companies now looking outside of the US for hiring and sourcing, which is amazing because there is so much talent around the world in other locations, but the cost of that is that you're dealing with time zones even across the US, but then you're when you start to play that in as well in terms of when it comes to collaboration and communication, that can really compound very quickly if this is an avenue that you're looking to go down when it comes to reducing your imprint within the US and looking to resource, as it were, if that's a real word, outside of it. So yes, you're getting all of this fantastic talent, but then you're having to deal with these other factors that then come into play when you go down that route. So making sure that those realities are realized to the wider team and very cross-functionally around the impacts that it might have within the different teams is also really, really important.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph. Sorry, Scott, I was going to say, have you got anything else to add on that?
Yeah, one little kicker there is just that during my time at Athena Health, there was a big move to, we had teams in India for a long time, but they hadn't been given full scope work. And one of the things that happened during my time there was that we did move full stack responsibility for parts of the product suite to India, and that meant building a design team there. I would imagine that many companies are looking at that as a way to change their cost base, and I think as a design leader, you're going to need to be open to that, and any experience in that realm is, I think, important. If you don't have it, there's lots of people out there that do, and I think, you know, it's not just India. There are lots of places. Latin America for the US companies is a great choice because of the time zone issue that Joe mentioned. But you know, we worked with teams in the Ukraine in my last role as well. And so we are, I think, increasingly going to be asked to look at how do you operate a team globally like that to take advantage of the talent and the different cost base of the different geographies.
That's definitely something I'm seeing as well. Obviously, with TDA, we work with hundreds of companies, and nearly every company I speak to is saying about setting up hubs across Europe, across India. Yeah, so it's very common right now. Has anyone else got anything else to add on operating, or shall I move on to influencing?
I didn't realize we'd moved on to operating. I think we've got plenty to say on that front.
Perfect. So how can you, can you tell us how design leaders can continue influencing innovation in this market?
Mansi, you want to go first?
Don't all jump at once, guys.
Right. Yeah, sure. I can start with a few things that I've been reflecting on. And I think one of the main things that has continued to stay relevant and valid is user centricity for all businesses. And, you know, that goes beyond the design function, right? Like that's relevant to the business, meaning the product teams, the R&D teams, engineering teams. I think everybody needs to have a well-established view of users and their pain points and how our products are getting used. I think one of the key indicators of progress and growth can be a balanced perspective of like quantitative and qualitative data to measure not only user satisfaction, which we definitely tend to focus on, but also business growth and revenue growth and how those pair up. And there was this interesting article by McKinsey which said that companies that excel at design, they grow their revenues and stakeholder returns nearly twice the rate of their industry peers. And so, there's a lot of, research done in this area to kind of correlate design maturity to business growth. And I think influencing by using some of those, anecdotes that are available and then proposing a aligned strategy that works for the industry that you're in and the growth areas that the company's focused on. I think that's worked effectively, at least for us, for sure. And then the other thing is just collaborating with peers, right? I think the more you're communicating and collaborating with your engineering leads and your product leads, I think there is a mutual synergy and a focus area, and I think just a better efficiency overall within the organization.
Yeah, great points, Mansi. I couldn't agree more in terms of working with other leaders to help the organization as a whole become more efficient. I think if we're going to talk about innovation, of course, it's 2023, so we need to talk about AI and LLMs. And I think there, again, I'd like to see designers sort of take the lead in terms of not necessarily the ins and outs of using generative AI and LLMs in software products, but in terms of figuring out how to deliver actual customer and user value by means of using LLMs and generative AI. And I think that, there's so many folks right now in the design industry that are thinking about the uses of generative AI purely in terms of, how can we improve designer workflows? How can we churn out mockups in Figma, 50% faster? And I think that this is very much, I don't even think that's missing the forest for the trees. I think this is looking at the little shrubbery and missing the forest, because the forest, in my mind, is really about how can we drive customer value by embedding LLMs, by embedding generative AI in workflows to make user workflows more efficient, to give the user more creative powers, and also importantly, because generative AI and LLMs are not deterministic, they're probabilistic, knowing when not to use LLMs in product workflows, knowing when to create design visions that also show scenarios of customers and users not deriving value from the use of LLMs, when LLMs hallucinate, when they yield output that doesn't make sense, or it doesn't fit with the user expectations. I think these are key value adds that design teams can bring to the table when innovating with this new technology.
Yeah, I think where I've seen sort of like the most success in sort of like driving innovation is without trying to, I mean, Dmitry, you're totally right. We can't not talk about AI at the moment, but like to be less like specific, like I think the partnerships thing that was mentioned earlier, I think is like the biggest thing. I've seen a lot of progress by just like not being like sneaky about it and setting up like cross-functional like secret projects, but just being like open around like, here's something that I feel like is something that we can be investing in, or that we can spend like some time like exploring, and using that to snowball and sort of like create either not even new SKUs, just like new sort of areas of, you know, ideation and things like that. I've seen work incredibly successful that, you know, it's not only sort of like driving like engagement from the, you know, the wider design team, who have, like, let's be honest, are suffering huge impacts through the layoffs and things like that. So it's like keeping morale up in that instance by driving sort of like more, you know, creative outlets for driving like engagement in the company itself. But also it's sort of like it grants visibility into the design team and works cross-functionally with partnerships that you may not have established like fully, or you're looking to like revisit. So those are some things that sort of like we're trying at the company, and it's just camaraderie, I think, is the, you know, the name of the game when it comes to sort of like driving innovation. And it's really great to see sort of that level of engagement cross-functionally with the design team as well. That's something that we're trying within Project 44.
When I think about this topic, I've got two points. One is building on what Georgia said, the cross-functional teams. The way I tend to think about that is cross-functionally, you can think about push and pull. So I think design teams typically, and I'm including design research in this, have some superpowers that they can bring to the table for that. And you should be, what I always try to do is from a push perspective, that's proactively going out and finding the data. And I'll say up front, qualitative research is powerful in lots of ways, but some quant data will really wake up your colleagues usually. And you can get that quant data from lots of different places within the business, or you can go do the primary research yourself. And so that's coming and sort of feeding them data and potential avenues to focus on. The other way to do it is to go around and just ask them what's in their mind, what's on the horizon. And that's a great way to be influencing the roadmap. Is they say, well, I'm really heads down on building this feature and getting it out the door right now, but every now and then when I look beyond that horizon, I really wonder about these three things. Well, that's a great thing for a design leader to send their team after, to gather qualitative insight, quantitative insight, and whip up a few prototypes to answer those questions. And suddenly you become a really invaluable radar for your colleagues. And the amount of influence you have through that process is obviously huge. The second point I wanted to make, and I've had some time to reflect on this over the last couple of months, is I think it's easy for us as design leaders to sort of fall back into focusing on the problems that are served to us by leaders. And it could be, if you report to a head of product, it could be the head of product. If you report to a CEO, it could be the CEO. They tend to be worried about certain things. As I just said, you can go ask them and send you in those directions. And they tend to talk to you about the things that they think fit the remit of design. But in several of my roles, the places where I've been most impactful, I think, is in expanding the remit of design beyond like the digital product, and instead really taking a step back and saying, what is the experience we want to build for the customer? And the answer to that could be an AI system behind text messages. It could be a digital product. It could be a new service. It could be a change to the way that the organization is structured, or a service organization. And so I think one thing I'd be doing when times are tough is making sure that you're not designing the things you're asked to design, but you're designing the things that are going to have the most impact on business revenue and expenses. And I almost guarantee you that the non-designers who might be directing your work as a design leader don't have the same instincts about where you can be most impactful. And there's probably truth in both of them, but I'd certainly be taking a long, hard look at, are you designing the right things to have the most impact on the business?
Thank you. Would anyone else like to add anything to Scott's comments? No? Thanks, guys. That was really insightful. Thank you so much. And we're now going to open it up to the floor. I'm just going to give me 1 second. Perfect. Has anyone got any questions for our panel?
Please don't be shy.
Any questions?
Kim, I'll go. My name is Priyat Nagar. Question for the folks on the design leadership. What is the thing that keeps you up at night and that stresses you out, especially in this sort of like the weird state that we're all in?
Everything. I think for me, it's to be honest, it's like it's continuously proving value. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think like my esteemed colleagues, they mentioned it far better than I could possibly. But it's product design has the word product in it, but I think there's so much more focus on the design part of it that being like having to remind sort of at sort of like the corporate level of the value that we bring, that is not just how things look on the surface that you're designing for. That's the thing of just like continuously driving value. So that's the thing that I most worry about, and continuously communicating that upstream.
Yeah, I completely agree, Joseph. And then the other thing is, how do you keep up the morale, when times are tough, when you're losing teammates, when, there are so many demands, you're operating under tight timelines and budgets. And so naturally, a lot of the good, innovative ideas that are maybe harder to build sometimes get deprioritized. And so how do you keep that long-term perspective and continue to motivate teams in the right direction, even though you're being agile and incremental? And continue to, keep the team and the organization focused on, high value innovation.
Yeah, 100% from my perspective as well. Keeping the morale, keeping the team collaborating, whether internally within the team or with cross-functional partners, and also I would say walking the right balance of contributing to short-term execution, because it's such a focus right now, while also thinking about the longer term, vision for the team, for the product experience, and for how design can influence the rest of the organization as a function.
Yeah, a similar points. I'll go back to my push-pull terminology. I think when I was in a role, that the issue was, do I understand enough about like who's paying the bills? And it might be the investors, and or it could be whoever's in the budget control seat. Do you understand their priorities? And are you doing things that are going to fulfill those priorities? And there's a difference between difference in perspectives there, right? Like, are you actually doing the things in your opinion and in your knowledge that are going to move those needles? Are you seen to be doing the right things as well? Is your team seen to be doing the right things? Those are the things that keep me up at night. There's actually a similar thing as a candidate, which is you've got to both, but you've got to balance that, saying what you think people want to hear in their role, looking for a design leader, with what you actually want out of a job as well, and getting that balance right is tough.
Thanks, guys. Any other questions? That was a great question, Priya, by the way. Thank you. Any others?
Can I ask a question? Is that okay?
Sure.
Please.
Sorry, I know this conversation is more about like design leaders, but as like a junior designer who was recently laid off and, is trying to, I haven't worked at a FANG company. So, in Joseph, I think, or maybe it was Scott's example, getting past those filters, that's not going to happen for me. So I'm just trying to spend my time, leveling up and just listening to you, attending webinars like this and listening to just different thought leaders. I guess, do you have any advice for someone in my situation in terms of like how I could be best spending my time, other than job searching, of course?
I was going to say on the job searching front, I think, FANG is one filter. It's not the only filter. I think people come through who don't have that. I was using it as an example. I do think that it's a numbers game in the end, because and the numbers are just much harder. You have to roll the dice a lot more times to make it fit. If there's 300 applicants instead of 50, your chances are 1 in 300 instead of 1 in 50. And so you definitely have to just be making more connections, because you're going to find a place that happens to spot a few things on your resume that really jump out and appeal to them. I mean, obviously you want to make those materials that you submit as good as possible, so that there's nothing for them to ding you on, but also you got to throw out a lot of hooks. And I'd be doing that not just with job applications, but also with networking. So that was sort of the direct thing. I think in terms of improving yourself, I'll leave it to the others to answer on that front.
I think I would echo the networking part. That one slips away, quite easily when you're so focused on perfecting your resume, your portfolio, and focusing on interview prep. And, just don't get discouraged by, just lag in, responses that you get from companies, because it does take time. But in the meantime, always dedicate a portion of your time to networking and probably seeking out a mentor. I think that's a really good way to, kind of stay grounded, get some advice as you're going through, stay balanced in your approach, and, just get a little bit more perspective of diverse industries and, find your niche. Yeah.
Yeah, I would heavily +1 the finding your niche part. And I know that this can be difficult for early career folks, because it can be hard to tell what am I good at? What is sort of my ikigai? The intersection of what I'm good at and what people are willing to pay me for. And I think this is where the mentorship part comes in. But ultimately, I think it's tempting for junior folks, in my experience, to be all things to all people. I would highly urge you to not try that approach, and instead to try pinpointing hopefully with the help of a mentor, a space that that is broad enough that you have a non-trivial number of opportunities to apply for, but also sufficiently narrow that you can focus yourself, gain some experience, whether working on a pro bono basis, working with nonprofits, doing contract work, and whatever the case may be, and then leverage that experience into finding your first job in that space. Because it's much, even in the current market, it is 100 times more difficult for junior folks than for folks who have landed their first 1 or 2 gigs where they can show specific impact and specific projects and accomplishments in a particular space. I think once you get to that point in your career, I wouldn't say it's smooth sailing, but certainly smoother sailing and much more rewarding as well.
Yeah, I mean, you stole the words right out of my mouth, Dmitry. I was going to say contract work is probably, I don't know what kind of roles you're looking for, but I know that there is still a little more appetite for contract work, and that can be a really nice way to like build up like lots of different examples that you can put together. Anecdotally speaking, a friend of mine, actually, he's sort of going through something similar, and he actually reached out to his local like pet sitting company, and they needed a redesign of like their product platform, and he used that as an opportunity. So there are always avenues to go through that, but I feel for you, but I think it's just a case of, even with the work that you have, like perfecting the narrative can probably do more than you might think to put yourself in a position to showcase what you can do, because narrative is always going to be everything. There's always interesting ways to spin the work and the time that you have spent at the places you have. So that's where I would focus, and then also like contract work, I think is always great.
Thank you so much.
Hi, sorry, I have a question as well. Hi, everyone. My name is Shairi. I actually work with Dmitry at Atlas. And this question is for each one of the panelists today. So what is the one practice, do you think, as a design team, we should move away from to increase our efficiency? And what is the one thing that we should incorporate as a design team?
Firstly, great question. One thing we should move away from. It drives me crazy when I'm working and iterating and design, like thinking about sort of like different directions that a problem can take, and people like either delete or they build off of, and sort of like you remove that historic path away from where you were to where you land. Keep everything. That's the one thing that I would say, like, as you're iterating, as you're designing, keep everything, because not 9 times out of 10, that's a ridiculous statistic. A lot of times you will go back to one of those ideas that you left, and you'll incorporate that, or in instances of something that I came across today, I dug up something I had done previously and incorporated into some work that I'm doing now. So never delete anything, like prosperity forever through iterations. I'll remain in this side of the topic and pass it to other colleagues if they've got anything that they want to say on that.
I think one thing for me, and not trying to generalize it, but avoiding the big reveal. I think designers try to, kind of be in their creative space, and they want to spend all this time, and, then they get attached to the idea, and they want to be like presenting it and, expecting a really positive response from stakeholders. It's a natural tendency to do that. I think it's much more advisable to collaborate all the way through. More times than not, I think we've implemented design thinking so fundamental into our approach that we've got great ideas coming in from engineers, from product leaders, from everybody, and the collective output of that type of a process has always been stronger in my perspective than just being siloed and individual, and kind of having a more waterfallish process. Definitely true of an enterprise space where I think the teams have definitely matured, but it's something to always keep in mind, that every time you find yourselves just iterating by yourself, maybe it's a good idea to connect with peers and, bounce off a couple of ideas, because by the end, you might just find out that some of what you're thinking is just infeasible. And so being cognizant of the time spent in the iterations and, collectively coming out with a stronger outcome, that's definitely my preferred approach.
You stole my one, Nancy. I'll just plus one there, and I'll add one little, because I see designers do this all the time. There's this tendency to want to make the idea better before you show it.
Right.
And the irony is that the best way to make the idea better is to show it earlier. The one thing I'll add is that I think what I've seen happening more and more with teams is that they spend a lot of time talking within the software team, so the engineers, the PMs, those people. They do spend time talking to users, maybe not frequently enough. I think we could all do with more frequent user input. A part of the business that often gets overlooked is your sales team, your customer service team, your operations team,
right.
People who often are spending the majority of their day talking to customers. And I think they get a bad rap sometimes as, having crazy ideas about what you should do next, or if maybe you shouldn't take the roadmap straight out of their mouths, but you certainly should be taking your ideas to them and getting their feedback. I think they're a great resource. And so, yeah, show things early and often to people inside the company and outside the company. Yeah.
Yeah, couldn't agree more about the showing things early and often thing. And I would even go a step, I guess, ahead of that step. One of the things that I've seen recently that stuck in my mind was a quote from L. David Marquette, who is a leadership writer. He wrote the book Turn the Ship Around, which is a really great book on leadership. And his phrase was, "Short, early conversations make efficient work." And I think it's really key for design teams and designers to have those short, early conversations with our cross-functional partners within the team before we even get to the point where we have mocks, before we even get to the point where we have design artifacts. Have the conversation, ask the stupid questions. Chances are they're not going to be so stupid, and get clarity and get alignment. And I think on the sort of opposite end of that, from in terms of the process perspective, is edge cases and scale. Certainly, for B2B and enterprise products, the extent to which we think about edge cases and we think about scale and we think about which edge cases are likely to occur in actual use, which ones our users, our customers are likely to encounter, and how they're likely to deal with scale can influence so much the actual effectiveness of the user experiences that we design. It's one thing to design something in Figma and say, oh, this looks good to me, and with a simple enough workflow and just a few items, this is going to be fine. But what will happen when that design actually the rubber hits the road on that design, and it gets tested by users with mental models different from ours, with assumptions different from ours, with business rules different from ours? What is going to happen? How resilient is that experience going to be to those things? I think is something that we need to continually think about and continually bring to conversations to make sure that the experiences we design are effective.
Something as well of stuff that we should start to bring in, because I know that was sort of like the other side of your question, is and I think this actually goes for both leadership and for sort of more atypical sort of like IC roles, is to start to move away from not measuring work output purely from screens in Figma, essentially. Because I think I think a lot of the sort of like the undercurrents of what we've been talking about is design as a function, it sort of like has so much more to offer and is offering that, and sort of like communicating that up around like the value of design and sort of the impact it can have and the revenue generation that can come from that is it can take a bit of a toll if you're only thinking about like what you're designing in Figma, when the majority of your time should be, you know, out of it, having these conversations and working around alignment and direction rather than getting stuff like pen to paper. So, you know, bringing in that sort of like mentality and sort of like team ethos that we are not the pixels we push, we are, you know, the alignment that we create, I think is something that, you know, I think is a really good thing to start fostering more within design teams.
That's a great point, Joe. And I would also add to that, in terms of stopping doing things, stop thinking that we are alone in this. Just as, you know, it's tempting for folks to measure design teams by how many Figma screens they've created these days. I'm seeing similar things being applied to engineering teams. How many lines of code are you writing? How many pull requests are your folks doing per day? I'm seeing similar things applied to product management in terms of, you know, how many user stories have you delivered on? How many story points have you delivered last sprint? This is all, to put it bluntly, idiotic. And we are not alone in experiencing this idiocy, unfortunately. Our cross-functional partners are as well, and we can band together with them to talk about, you know, what value are we adding to the business as a cross-functional product development organization, rather than thinking that, you know, oh, boo-hoo, poor designers, we're the only ones who are suffering this right now.
Yeah, those are great points. I think Joe, Dmitry agree in terms of, you know, just testing all the way, pressure testing the design is really important. I think especially in enterprise, we're always looking at, you know, data intensive software that really, you know, the outcomes for users leans towards efficiency and productivity. So very different goals than, you know, maybe what a B2C environment deals with. So certainly I think, you know, constantly testing the software and iteratively doing that through the process. And I think one thing that I would add is, as designers, take ownership of the product and the product objective. So meaning, you know, ask to be involved early and often, maybe day one of the product, when roadmaps are being discussed, when the objective is being discussed and the vision is being discussed. I think visibility and clarity to where we're headed is important. And, you know, just ask why. Like every time you're in these discussions, try to understand, why is this beneficial? What benefit is it going to provide? And truly understand, you know, by designing this feature or implementing it, what benefits are, you know, our users getting or the business is getting. I think, you know, just over time, you get a lot more maturity and understanding and better alignment across teams when everybody understands the objective.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I have a quick question for you guys. Hi, nice to meet you, Gary. I'm a motion designer and animator. So unfortunately, a lot of our gateway is resume. Do you think resume for designers should be very designed or keep it plain?
I'll give a quick answer on that. I think it should be tidy for sure. I think you should also remember that a lot of these resumes get chewed up and crunched through a machine. So I had an interesting discussion with a colleague recently that put logos for the companies rather than the company name. And I was like, is that going to work, or is that going to get lost when it gets crunched through the processor? I think as a designer, it definitely needs to look tidy and well laid out. But at the same time, I think it's a format that's sort of required. So that said, I think the facts of your resume are important and you get them across. But I think in most situations as well, they're gonna look at beyond your resume at other things.
Yeah,
Did I omit those logos? Sorry.
Just the logos, like when some of these resume processing things can't read images, right? They can only read text. So you're going to lose the name of the company you worked for if you only have the logo.
Right. I was going to just reiterate that, Scott, because I think design one for the algorithm, because you got to understand how these things get processed. But once you're through, once you do get the opportunity to speak, at a personal level, then you can be creative, right? Like then you can showcase some of your skills and, be more personal. But I think to get through the first gateway, it's important to understand, what these algorithms are doing and making sure that you have all of the keywords, at least, within the textual format.
I think this is actually a very similar thing to like, should designers have like a website portfolio as well? I think it's like, at least how I kind of bucket these things together. I think at the end of the day, I love the analogies going on around like how many more rolls of the dice you have. I think if you have like my original CV was just like, it was like a table in like Google Docs or something like that. And like, I didn't measure it, but I could see the conversion when I actually put some effort into like a little bit of beautification into it, and like even themed it across like my web presence and things like that. So is it required? No, but I think you're augmenting or you're enriching your chances by making sure that there is unification around how you're selling yourself. So I would think about it more as like, how do you want to be portrayed and seen rather than should you do it or not, I guess is how I would put it.
Yeah, I would plus one of those things, and the principle that I would say I would suggest using there is progressive disclosure. So essentially, with a resume, you are disclosing a little bit about yourself. Keep the look clean, keep the information hierarchy well defined, so that ultimately it accomplishes the goal that it needs to accomplish of getting you to the point where the hiring manager is looking at it. Then you have your portfolio, which is sort of the next stage. And again, it has the job of getting you to the point of passing the hiring manager review and getting you to latter stages of the interview process. And then you can really, in those stages, you can really pull out all the stops. You can have detailed case studies that really allow you to show off in depth to the rest of the hiring team what you bring to the table and why you're the ideal candidate.
Okay, one quick technical. It's not design related, but if I want to do that improvement, so my resume, which is getting sent to a lot of recruiters or employers, how can I get to that process, the technical process where everything I hit all the technical stuff, where I can pass on the first screening process you were talking about? So where should I start? Approaching one of you, or go to a different company that specialize in that? Because I've been to one of them and I don't think it was that successful. And I'm sorry if my question is like exceeding the time or your time or anything.
I'm just not sure on that front, actually. I think personally, I've just looked at various sites that give you advice about that. I have asked to see other people's CVs, resumes, to compare them. I've used ChatGPT to analyze it.
Okay.
Actually did a pretty good job. But I think you are asking for a level of depth that I haven't reached in terms of trying to optimize the resume.
That's something we may be able to help you out with, actually. Sorry, Joe, if you've got a good tip.
No, I just say like best option, phone a friend. I think that's Scott. I think you hit it. Every time that I've like created even like any kind of content that's for like self-promotion or case studies, I just like show it to someone, get their feedback on it. Is this clear? Does that make sense? I think that's always the best option.
Yeah, one of the first things, once I built a portfolio website, one of the first things I did is I sent it to a few trusted recruiters, including one at TDA, for their feedback, because they see a lot of resumes, they see a lot of portfolio websites. They're a great person to give you feedback on that. So,
all right. So Kim, I'll reach out to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. That was wonderful. If anyone has any questions for our panel, I'm sure they'd be happy for you to reach out on LinkedIn. But again, have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you at our next event.
Thank you so much. Thanks for hosting.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, TDA.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.